Welcome to the Stage Analysis members midweek video. Tonight I'm going to start by doing a special feature on the software group and looking for stocks in the group in starting to form stage one bases. I went through the entire group earlier in the day. There's more than 300 stocks in the software group, but it's been popping up in the stage analysis watch list over the last month or so on numerous occasions with some short-term moves, spring type action, starting to see a little bit of a turnaround in the group. The vast majority of stocks in the group are still in stage 4, and there's very little in stage 2. There's only a few stocks in stage 2 really, and there's still a few in stage 3, but the vast majority remain in stage 4. But I was able to find potentially 17 stocks that are starting to show signs of accumulation or a change of behaviour, so they might possibly be moving into the early part of stage 1. Some are a little bit more established than others, so I just wanted to run through those initially tonight, and as a big part of the stage analysis method is starting to see the change through the stages, because the entries method, the method's entry points are as it breaks out into early stage 2 and on the pullback. So at this point here, for example, this is our 4 stages example on the website. So this is a stage 1 base through here, and then at the stage 2 breakout point is here. So this is the method's A entry point, and then on the pullback, so either on the back up or break as you go back out from here. So this is the backup entry point. So these are the 2 entry areas of the stage analysis method. I also use the Wyckoff method as well, which uses springs and up thrusts and obviously buying within the base. So from a Wyckoff perspective, you actually get the entire part of the late part of stage 1 as well. So all this area from here, as you start to move, we've got a little bit of local spring type action in here. So a last point of support, which is a local spring within here. So this is an initial entry point, then potentially other earlier entry points within the base structure here. So all through this kind of area here, Wyckoff and Stage Analysis method entry points. You've also got continuation breakouts as well through bases as you start to move higher and start to break out again. You've got further continuations, etc., etc. So this is the example on the website you can find. You click on the Learn tab at the top of the Stage Analysis website. There's a bunch of resources in there, as well as especially in the forum where there's 9 years of discussion on the method. So if you're interested in stage analysis, then this is a good place to start. After the software group, I'm going to go back into the normal members content. We're going to look at what's been going on in the major indexes this week, some of the short-term market breadth, and then some of the watch list stocks in a little bit more detail. So let's get into the software group now. So as I said, I found I think it was 17 stocks from the group. So these are the 17 stocks that I found in the software group that are potentially starting to show signs of early stage 1. So just for a note there, so we go back to the 10 by page view here. So starting off with ABST. So this is quite a small name really. The volume is only 161,000 there on the weekly chart here. So this is a very, very thin one in terms of what I normally look at, but I thought it's a good example of the 4 stages, so it was a good place to start, as it's starting to show the characteristics that we look for in a stage 1 base as it starts to develop out, as we start to come out of stage 4. So if we go back quickly to the diagram here, so stage 1, we obviously have this area here. We start to break out into stage 2, and then as you start to move into stage 3, you start to see signs of distribution appearing at the top of stage 2, and then you see a change of behaviour. We start to move into stage 3, and then we start to break down as we finally break down into stage 4. So this point over here in the example chart might look like a lot of the charts you're seeing at the moment. This is the 10-week moving average here, this dotted line, and this is the 30-week moving average. So you can see we're still a long way below a declining 30-week moving average, and you can see there's near-term resistance here as well that it hasn't got above. So although this looks like a few months of basing, it could potentially quite easily continue lower. So if we go back into the stage analysis examples here, I can show you that this one actually did. This was a shipping stock NMM, NMM. So you can see from this point here in stage 4, it then moved sideways actually. So that was the previous chart example there, and so you can see it actually broke. It started to form a base, but it couldn't actually make the stage 2 breakout. It didn't turn up. It actually formed a small up thrust and reversed back down again, then made a stage 4 continuation breakout. So this is an example of when a stock gets into stage 4B. So it's the later part of stage 4. So at the moment, you might see a lot of charts that look like this part of the chart. So they're down in this kind of area. So we could potentially see this kind of behavior where we go sideways for a long time and they then continue lower. But obviously what we're looking for with a stage 1 base, if a base starts to form, is for the breakout to attempt to start to turn here and the 30-week moving average to start turning back up again. So you can find these on the Stage Analysis website, as I said, and it shows the 4 stages as well as the sub-stages, which are from Stan Weinstein's Global Trend Alert service, which he's been doing for the last 30 years. So these are how the stages are broken down into more minor stages. So you have stage 1A and 1B, 2A and 2B. And the A and the B simply mean early and late in the phase. So it gives you a little bit more. So there's a lot of stocks at the moment which you might consider stage 4B minus, which the definition is, although not yet officially in stage 1A, the stock has now seen the low for the cycle. So there's a chance that we've seen some of those at the moment. There's been a lot of short covering type rallies, and with the recent moves off the lows. So there's a possibility that some of the ones that look like they're in early stage 1 could still be in stage 4B minus. So as they're not technically yet in stage 1, as they're just forming base structures within a stage 4 decline. So if we go back to the charts here. So this first chart here, ABST, for example, you can see it broke down into stage 4 back in August last year. And then it's been making continuous stair-stepping pattern lower. And then it started to move back above the 30-week moving average in the last 4 weeks here. So you can see we got a break above 4 weeks ago here. And on big volume, the week prior to that, we had a significant reversal bar off the low here. So it's a spring type action on the weekly chart there. So starting to form a structure, but the 30-week moving average is still only just starting to flatten out. It's starting to consolidate near the highs, and we're seeing a contraction in volume with the 30-week move, the relative strength versus the S&P 500 starting to move in line with the zero line, which is compared to the relative strength versus the S&P 500. So starting to move in line with the S&P 500. So potentially showing signs of stage 1 behavior. If we look at it on a daily chart here, actually if I show you on the gallery view, you can see both at the same time. So you can see the daily view and the weekly chart underneath that. So we'll get that up. So this price structure here, you can see the base structure that's starting to develop through here. We've had a spring type action in here. So this is our local selling climax, automatic rally, secondary testing, and then further tests in phase B. And so we've potentially got a phase C low here with a spring and then rallying back up towards the top of the range. But with phase C, you expect to see the price break out above the range and then start to make with a sign of strength and then potentially hold above and start to before moving off higher. So at this point in here, if it did manage to do that, we would be expecting this kind of price behavior, potentially to form a higher base structure and hold above the top of the prior base. So that's one potential scenario. It's not guaranteed. You could quite easily form an up thrust here and start to roll back down and still continue to form a broader base structure within here, as it's very, very early within the structure at the moment. But I just wanted to show you the difference between the daily and the weekly charts here, as it gives a good example of how because most of the time you're more likely going to be looking at a daily chart, as I know not many of you actually look at weekly charts. But with stage analysis, it's much easier to first look at the weekly chart when you're trying to determine the stage, and then drop down to the lower time frames, the daily chart and the intraday chart. So you can see on the intraday 2-hour chart here, this is in a stage 2 advance, but potentially starting to roll over into stage 3. As you can see, it's starting to roll and turn, and we've got a little bit of a base structure starting to develop on the intraday here. So potentially moving into stage 3 on the intraday, and so it could potentially start to break to the downside and move into a stage 4 decline on the intraday, which would then take us back down towards our 50-day moving average in here for a further test potentially. So yeah, so up we've got Bumble, so this is much earlier than we can see on the previous chart there. You can see this base structure is potentially, like I said, it's still in stage 4 at the moment. We've just seen a small change of behaviour starting to develop, but you can see we've had a higher low and an attempt at a base structure, but this might need a lot more work. It's still a long way below obviously prior resistance here. If we look at the daily chart, see still underneath this 200-day moving average, got a little bit of a base structure starting to develop in here. Actually, if I put the log scale on this, because when you've had a sharp stage 4 decline, actually the log scale can be more helpful even on the daily chart. So you can see it's had a sharp move over the last month or so, and it's starting to break above, but you've got resistance at this 200-day moving average. So if it does start to come back into the range here, then potentially could up thrust. It might need to develop further, but still this one showing early stage 1A potentially at the moment. BRZE, again, still potentially in stage 4, but starting to show signs of developing a base structure here. We've had a little bit of spring type action at the bottom of the base structure, so potential selling climax, automatic rally, secondary test type behavior, but this could also be the selling climax point down here. It could just continue in a downtrend, as we haven't yet broken the stride of this downtrend at the moment. So still in stage 4 at this one, but potentially starting to develop a base structure. And again, if we drop down onto the daily chart here, you can see that structure in a little bit more detail. So we've got this across here in previous levels. So you can see we're starting to develop here. So potential selling climax, automatic rally, secondary test type behavior. So we've got a spring type action within phase B and a test starting to move out of here. So potentially if it can start to get back above the 50-day moving average, we could potentially start to develop up and out of the base structure, and then potentially form and move off towards stage 2 behavior. But it could be a long way off that yet, as it's very, very early and still in stage 4 potentially. Like I said, 4B minus, so too early to call it stage 1, but it could be developing a base structure that could eventually turn into stage 1. CXM, again, another one with still in stage 4 here. You can see we draw the stride of this downtrend at the moment. Still hasn't broken the stride of that. So still within a downtrend channel, but you can see there's potentially the start of a structure forming here, although it's still underneath the IPO week low there. So potentially starting to form stage 1. So I'd very much say it's still in stage 4, but potentially could be stage 1A with a few little attempts at the 30-week moving average here. Again, if we drop down to the daily time frame, you can see the developing structure a little bit more clearly. So if we go take it all the way to the top there, you can see the broader structure. So, but at the moment, it's very much in line with the 21-day moving average and the 50-day moving average in here. So we need to see a near-term pivots broken at the very least, and starting to move back up towards that 200-day moving average for a test, and then starting to move up and out. But as I said, very early. So if it does move up and out, I would expect a higher base structure to develop. DLO, again, another one that's not quite yet in stage 1. I would call it still in stage 4. But you can see it's had this spring on the weekly chart at the IPO low here. So an important level. It had a very strong spring type reaction to and followed through, and then it's continued up. So potentially a little bit of a change of behavior back up to the 30-week moving average now. So we've potentially got the start of a base structure developing here. So we need to see how that's going to play out at the moment. You can see on the daily time frame here, if I mark the structure up a little bit more carefully, you can see what we call a shakeout move in here. So it's a terminal shakeout which is spring number one, and then a continuation through. So we need to see a break through this 30 level with some stronger volume coming in for a test up towards the top of the base structure and a 200-day moving average there, which potentially could serve as resistance in the near term. As obviously with anything that's still had a stage 4 decline or a deep stage 4 decline, you're going to have a lot of overhead resistance to deal with. In terms of actually looking for base structures, I didn't actually go into this quickly here. So if we go to the Wyckoff accumulation schematic, so this is the accumulation schematic number one that you can find on stock charts and Wyckoff Analytics or in any good Wyckoff book. They all mark it up slightly differently, but the general crux of it is you have obviously the 5 phases here, A to E. So the vast majority of charts at the moment are only just coming out of phase A or into phase B at the moment. We're seeing this kind of behavior. We've not got many that have had big base structures, have formed a strong stage 1 base structure and then started to come back out again. So we've potentially got this kind of behavior going on in a lot of stocks with early moves and even still a lot in early phase A. But this is the kind of price action you want to be looking for. And our entry points as I said, in the Wyckoff method, start at the spring in this kind of area here, and then in the test area, and then through to phase E. So all through this kind of area are the entry points using the Wyckoff method and the stage analysis method. So, but at the moment, the vast majority of charts, as I said, are still more over in this kind of area. But they don't necessarily have to develop full bases, but that's what a more developed base does look like. If we look at the software group as a whole quickly, before I go back into the individual charts, you can see the actual group itself is still in a stage 4 decline. So this is the weekly chart. You can see the stage 3 at the top here. So the big stage 2 advance through 2020, 2021, and you started to see a change of behavior, and then actually a very sudden breakdown to the software stocks. They didn't manage to go sideways for a while like a lot of other groups did. They actually broke down very quickly into stage 4. So we've had secondary breakdowns within here. So it's been stair-stepping its way down. So we need to see this start to move back up towards that declining 30-week moving average, and then start to potentially chop around and form a base structure, potentially then start to move back up and out into stage 2. You might not get that. It might continue down in stage 4. This area here, we can see we're in a decline. This could continue to obviously decline, and like we saw on the example, we could go sideways, could make a sideways base structure that then ends up continuing to the downside. So don't take anything for granted in terms of just because we're starting to form a little bit of a change of behavior and we're starting to see some bases form, that we're going to necessarily break back out into stage 2 again, as especially with the software group, a vast majority of stocks in the group have had really, really serious declines. There's been 70 to 80% declines in the vast amount of stocks in the group. So there's a lot of technical damage that's been done, and hence why you'll note that a lot of the stocks that I'm actually showing here, developing structures, are quite young, and although they might have had big declines, they've not got the history that a lot of the other ones have that have had those huge declines after massive stage 2 advances. So they've potentially got less overhead resistance to deal with, as they tend to be younger stocks. So as I said, D-low here potentially with this spring, and then move up towards the 30-week moving average. You can see there's a potential change of behavior going on here. So signs of stage 1 developing, DUOL, again in stage 4 still, but potentially starting to show signs of a base structure developing. And if we drop down onto the daily time frame here, you can see the structure that's been developing. We've got spring type action in here that's moved back up towards the top of the range. So it's attempting to test the top of the range at the moment. We've still got the 200-day moving average within sight here as well. So potentially if it does manage to break up, that could serve as near-term resistance. And if it does, you wouldn't want to see it drop much back into the range again. So you'd want to see it develop, and then potentially with some VCP type action start to move up and out again. But at this point in here, could quite easily form an up thrust, could form a little move and then start to come back in and move back down to the downside within the range. So Stage 1 can be very volatile. And as I said, we're only just moving into stage 1A on this at best. So as it's only just starting to test this declining 30-week moving average.